线上人看到的，我们现在看到是这个是吧？
对。
然后如果说我是吴院长和常修泽他们就坐在那儿发言的话，就不用再上到那个讲台了，是吧？好的，好的。 Hello, Dr. Keta. Are you online?
Hello. Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Nice to see you online.
Nice to
Nice to see you online. Thank you for your contribution to our event.
It's a
Yes.
my great pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. And you will share the screen from your side, right?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, no problem. So our meeting will start after 20 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so see you then.
See you then. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye-bye.谁的？邹老师您好，您上线了吗？
上线了
啊，
听得见吗？
可以听得见。您
好的
方便开一下摄像头吗？看一下是不是正常。
OK，开不开啊？
对，我看这边好像视频。
是不是把你锁住了？是不是把你把它锁住了？
我这边没有锁，我们这边是有锁的。他的周老师的那个视频摄像头是我们这边锁的吗？周慧媛老师的摄像头。哦，可以了，可以了，现在可以看到了。
对，现在可以了。
啊，现在可以了，现在可以了。
刚才给他们锁住了，对。
好，那个咱们的会议大概15分钟后这样子，17分钟左右开始。
没问题，没问题。
好，谢谢。
对。富国。
你在声音可以了吗？
对你这个后面的图挺好看，
你在大连吗？
我在大连，
还是在
对，
你
我在大连，
在办公室吧？
我在家里，
哦，Thank you。
嗯。
鹏飞老师您好。
哎，你好，能听到吗？
可以听到，可以
好的，
听到。
谢谢。
可以的，挺好。咱们会议大概10分钟后开始。
好的。
好，谢谢。
尊敬的各位来宾，本次会议将于5分钟之后开始，请您尽快就座，并将手机等通讯设备关闭或置于静音状态。谢谢您的合作。
Ladies and gentlemen, the event will begin shortly in 5 minutes. Can we please ask for you to kindly take your seats? We would also like to remind you to switch off all mobile phones and put electronic devices to silent mode. Thank you for your cooperation.
宾，本次会议将于1分钟之后开始，请您尽快就座，并将手机等通讯设备关闭或置于静音状态。谢谢您的合作。
Ladies and gentlemen, the event will begin shortly in 1 minute. Can we please ask for you to kindly take your seats? We would like to remind you again to switch off all mobile phones and put electronic devices to silent mode. Thank you for your cooperation.
各位来宾，大家下午好，欢迎大家回到2022年海洋合作与治理论坛分会场。接下来要进行的是议题3：气候变化与海洋合作。首先有请线下评论嘉宾中国东南亚南海研究中心理事会主席、 华洋海洋研究中心理事长吴世存先生和中国宏观经济研究院教授常修泽先生到台上落座，有请。现在有请本议题的主持人，台湾政治大学安全研究中心主任刘富国教授主持本议题。刘教授，有请。
Good afternoon. Perhaps also good morning. Somebody may be positioned somewhere in different time zone. Thank you so much for this great opportunity again, meeting old friends and new friends. This is a really timely issue. As we all know, starting from next week, November 8th to 16th, the upcoming COP27 will be starting in Egypt. So at this moment, so many delegates are traveling from everywhere to Egypt, preparing, looking into the progress of climate change and policy. I'm so delighted to have such an honor once again to join the organizer and the organizing team working on this particular issue. And obviously, climate change is one of the significant issue related to ocean governance today. So while we are studying ocean governance, of course, some especially important impact from climate change is something we have to really look into, not just from legal perspective, as well as international politics, and together with national politics perspective. So I'm also glad with this challenging position now. As this session, we have already invited 5 distinguished experts from different countries speaking on this important topic. And of course, later we will have 2 distinguished members to make comments thereafter. So altogether, this session, we will have 7 experts sharing their views with us. So without further ado, I just like to have an easy start to kickstart this particular session. Once again, I'd like to thank the organizing team for considering me to chair this very timely, important issue. So then let's now invite the first speaker, Dr. Keita Furukawa from Tokyo. Of course, in order to save time, I will not repeat what you can see from his CV. He is currently technical session chair of the Partnership in Environmental Management for the Seas of East Asia. So obviously, Professor Furukawa has already deeply involved in this process and also accumulating his professional knowledge. So I'm pretty sure Dr. Furukawa has a lot to offer. So Dr. Furukawa, can you take the floor now? Thank you once again.
Thank you, Professor Liu Fukao and Dr. Wu Shijing, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. This is Keita Furukawa from Tokyo. Thank you for the invitation to the Symposium on the Global Maritime Cooperation and Ocean Governance today. So let me start my talk. I'm working for PEMC on the regional cooperation and for the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation on the National Ocean Policy, and for Association for Shore Environment Creation on the local action. So I'd like to talk on the cooperation of the blue carbon ecosystem restoration as a climate action. And I'd like to start my talk from the quotation from the joint workshop by IFPES and IPCC in 2020. It has been pointed out that some good climate change mitigation measures are not compatible with the biodiversity conservation. For example, some afforestation and bioenergy development drive monotonous biota. On the contrary, including blue carbon ecosystem conservation and restoration are co-beneficial for the climate action and biodiversity's actions. In Japan, blue carbon ecosystem conservation and restoration is now becoming one of the frontline issues of the climate action led by the government. Policy will is presented, but the actual action is now driven in the local by the voluntary basis. Let me show some example from the Yokohama in Japan. One of the typical blue carbon ecosystem restorations in the local action in Japan is the eel grass bed restoration. It has been started as a conservation of the biodiversity and maximizing the productivity of the area. Now it is considered to have a blue carbon sequestration potential. NPOs are voluntarily implementing entities for restoration action. About 1,000 people have joined to the action annually. Oh, excuse me, I skipped the. Yep. And the seagrass restoration, as you know, that requires a highly technical and the scientific background to maximize the results. Our association offers such tools and personnel for assisting and organizing the action. It is very important to monitor the blue carbon sequestration mass in the field. And sometimes we are using the drone image and the on-site survey. One of the important and the inevitable stakeholder is the fisher folks. They have deep experience and daily activities at sea. Yokohama Fisheries Corporation offers the So Yokohama Fisheries Corporation offers the access to the sea and working place in the fisheries port, facilitate for the restoration actions. Such continual effort for blue carbon ecosystem restoration. Massive restoration works has been done, and the scenery we want comes true. Note that the seagrass habitat has highly dynamic behavior, and even the restoration has been done, but it will change year by year, and we have to monitor and adapt accordingly. So when we look around Japan as a nation, the blue carbon restoration strategies looks a bit different, or we need a more wider view for that. We are surrounded by the warm water current from south and cold water current from north, and stretched from subarctic to subtropic region from north to south. Then different types of seagrasses, seaweeds, and sea kelps are found along the coast. Recent studies counted about 21 different types of habitat classification, and it covers more than 1,800 square kilometers in total. Japanese government is trying to facilitate these habitat as a blue carbon ecosystem. Japanese government are pursuing blue carbon ecosystem restoration, conservation, and creation as one of the climate change actions since former Prime Minister Suga made a declaration for the achievement of the net zero carbon emission society until 2050. For example, Port Bureau under the Ministry of Land Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism is focusing on the co-benefit of restoration of the blue carbon ecosystem through construction works. while the fishery agency put focus on conservation and aquaculture of seagrasses, seaweed, and carpet. Government cooperated with academia to specify how we can determine carbon sequestration by blue carbon ecosystem in simple and consistent way. The new association named Japan Blue Economy Association has been formed to put certification on the J-Blue credit and establish a new voluntary market of the blue carbon credit. Through this market, companies can offset their carbon emission. A unique point of the J-Blue credit is that it includes the amount of the carbon sequestration and the cooperative work of legislation and reduction effort of carbon emission is also counted in the credit. Throughout this model, a company side gets cooperative social responsibility, CSR, and branding, and the NPO side gets sustainability of the action and well awareness from the society. If we look through into the regional level, the partnership in environmental management of the seas of East Asia, in short, PEMC, established multi-layer network. ES Partnership Council is set sustainable development strategies for seas of East Asia, in short, SDS-SEA, and monitoring its implementation through the state of coast system, in short, SOC. In these activities supported by the PNLG, the PEMC network of local government, and PNLC, the PEMC network of local learning center, that is a group of the academia, and authorized by the Ministerial Forum in the East Asian Sea Congress. The SDS-SEA established by the PEMC is giving shared vision for the making regional cooperation. Set goal has been given in the strategies, and each 5 years implementation plan will be guided as a lighthouse for the partner members, it including the each national government and also the non-governmental sectors. The coming implementation plan for the 2023 to 27 is highlighted the importance of the science-based decision-making, including inclusive society and enhancement of cooperation for healthy ocean, healthy people, and healthy economy. So these are recommendations from our experience for the discussion. The compatibility of climate action and biodiversity action is very, very important, so that we have to thinking about the two sides of the effect in the global basis. If we're thinking about the local action linked with the market, initiate bottom-up movement, and it will scaling up to the national level cooperation. In the regional arena, we should pay attention of inclusive society with good governance and achieving healthy ocean, healthy people, and healthy economy. And we are believing these cooperation can be scaling up to the global basis. So I really appreciate your kind attention and hoping to have a good conversation afterward. Thank you. Back to you, Professor Liu.
Thank you very much, Dr. Furukawa. From your presentation, I amazed the idea you are actually facilitating regional cooperation among countries and communities in the same region. It reminds me that there is a specific program which related to your work, research work. Early on this year, Japanese government donate in collaboration with UNDP Barbados, putting into lots of effort, trying to clean up sargassum from the Caribbean region. So perhaps that is also one of the dimensions. As a result of climate change in the Caribbean, that is exactly something meet with your target. I hope maybe later on you can share a little bit with us how exactly your government through this professional advice and then connect with regional country working on this significant project. So I really like to learn a little bit more about this. Okay, later we will come back to you. Thank you, Dr. Furukawa. So next speaker is Professor Teng Fei. Currently is a Deputy Director, Energy, Environment, Economy Institute at Tsinghua University in Beijing. He is also the Secretary General of the Energy Systems Engineering Committee of the China Energy Research Society. So Professor Teng Fei has a lot to offer. So please, straight to your topic, how we respond to the impact of climate change on the ocean. So Professor Teng, please take the floor. Thank you.
好的，谢谢主持人，也谢谢主办方，邀请我来就气候变化与海洋问题和大家分享一下我的看法。我是清华大学能源环境经济研究所的腾飞，我将从4个方面来介绍我们对气候变化与海洋的影响和应对方面的一些看法。第一个是气候变化对海洋的影响，特别是海平面上升及海洋酸化的趋势。2是气候变化对海洋及海岸带有关的事件和对生态系统的影响。3呢是中国在海洋和海岸带应对气候变化的主要的措施。4呢是海洋如何为应对气候变化来提供解决方案。那首先呢，我想简单介绍一下目前气候变化对海洋的影响。那第一点呢是海平面上升，由于人类活动引起的全球温室气体排放的增加，导致了全球的气候变化，同时呢也引起了全球海平面的加速上升。全球海平面上升的主要贡献是来自于海水的热膨胀和由于温升导致的冰川的融化。20世纪以来呢，全球海平面呈现了加速上升的趋势，平均海平面上升的幅度已经达到了14厘米，超过了过去接近3000年期间任何一个世纪的变化，并且呢还在呈现加速的态势。而中国的海平面呢，总体也呈现波动上升的趋势，并且有2个显著的特征。一呢是中国海平面的上升的速率要高于全球平均水平。那么在1993年到2016年期间，中国沿海海平面上升的速率大约是每年 3.9 毫米，而同期全球海平面的上升速率大约是每年3毫米。中国的上升速度比全球要快 30%。2呢是中国沿海的海平面呢也存在加速上升的趋势，从前20年的 2.6 毫米每年已经上升到了 3.3 毫米每年。那么随着未来气候变化的进一步加剧，中国近海的海平面将继续上升，而未来的海平面变化会进一步引起中国沿海的风暴潮和一些高水位的明显的变化。根据现有的估计，那么全球未来温升3度的时候，到本世纪末，中国东海海平面会上升33厘米到84厘米，南海海平面会上升34到79厘米。那么对中国沿海的区域有着非常重大的影响。那一些研究表明， 中国的经济中心的城市，像上海，在本世纪末气候变化的影响下，将大部位于海平面之下。那另外一个影响就是海洋的酸化，海洋是一个巨大的碳汇，目前呢，全球海洋中的碳储量大约是大气中碳储量的45倍，这说明呢，海洋里边碳含量的一个微小变化，就可以引起大气中碳含量的重大变化。而工业革命以来呢，人类活动引起的累计排放中，差不多有1/4是被海洋吸收的。那海洋通过吸收人为的二氧化碳排放，缓解了大气中二氧化碳浓度的增长，也缓解全球变暖。但同时，由于二氧化碳溶于海水，改变了海水中碳酸盐体系的动态平衡，也造成了海洋酸化的现象，导致呢全球海洋表面的 pH 值从 8.2 下降为 8.1， 相当于海水的酸性增加了 26%， 这严重影响了海洋生态系统的平衡。而中国的渤海、黄海、东海和南海等区域也都呈现海洋酸化的趋势。例如，我们今天在会场的三亚湾的海水的 pH 值年均就平均下降了 0.02， 酸化速度明显大于全球平均的水平。而未来在全球温升3度的情景下，中国近海海域的 pH 值下降幅度将超过 0.15， 对海洋和海岸带生态系统造成重大的风险。那第二点我想谈的呢，是气候变化对海洋和海岸带的极端天气事件以及生态系统的影响。那近几十年来的气候变化呢，叠加了人类活动的双重影响，以及目前中国存在的适应能力不足的问题，使得中国的海洋和海岸带呢处于比较脆弱的状态，面临着较高的风险。未来在全球进一步变化的背景下，中国的一些典型的海洋生态系统，像红树林、珊瑚礁，都面临着退化严重和生物多样性下降的风险，生态系统功能呢进一步下降，脆弱性增加。例如，过去30多年来，在气候变化和人类活动的叠加影响下，中国的大陆和海南岛的近岸的珊瑚礁消失了 80%， 而在过去15年，南海珊瑚的覆盖率从 60% 已经下降到了 20%， 并且全球变暖导致了极端天气事件的频率和强度大幅增加，特别是台风的数量和强度增加，登陆的地点呢不断的向北移动，使得中国的海岸带和大城市暴露在强台风的影响之下，对中国沿海城市的基础设施造成重大的影响。那么气候变化的背景下呢，中国沿海地区面临着更高的洪涝风险灾害。近几十年以来，中国沿海地区的海水入侵加剧，沿海地区的淡水资源遭到严重的影响。那么海平面上升叠加台风和风暴潮，导致沿海城市的基础设施防御气候风险的能力降低，加剧了滨海城市的洪涝的灾害风险。那第三一点呢，是面对逐渐增加的气候变化对海洋和海岸带的不利的影响，中国呢正在采取积极的应对措施。特别是今年6月中国政府发布了应对气候变化战略2035，其中呢对海洋和海岸带的适应行动进行了规划，其中主要包括几点。第一呢，是中国在未来将继续完善海洋灾害的观测预警和评估的体系，那么通过增强这一体系，加强对重大气候灾害的早期预测预警和风险的综合评估，来不断提高风险预警的能力。第二呢，是提升海岸带和沿海地区的防灾减灾的能力，加强海平面上升导致的海洋灾害风险的防范， 那么不断的推动沿海的城市来强化适应气候变化的和防灾减灾的能力。那么争取到2035年呢，全面更新完善一些重大基础设施应对气候灾害的设计标准。第三呢，是进一步加强沿海的生态系统的保护和修复，来完善海洋自然保护地的建设，来改善海洋生态系统的环境质量，提升海洋的生态碳汇能力，并且通过严格实施海洋自然保护地和生态保护的红线监管，来加强海洋生物多样性保护等举措，提升海洋生态系统的质量、稳定性和气候韧性。那未来呢，中国也希望和其他国家一起，通过适应行动来提升气候韧性，来加强海洋和海岸带的生态的这个环境。那最后一点呢，是海洋虽然受到了气候变化的影响，但是呢，它也为应对气候变化提供了一些可能的选项。例如，海洋蕴藏着巨量的可再生能源，包括海上风电、波浪能、潮汐能，有待开发。那根据最新的报告，2021年全球新增的海上风电装机达到了13.4吉瓦，其中3/4的贡献来自中国。那未来中国也会跟广大国家一起来开发海上风电和其他的来自海洋的可再生能源，为实现碳达峰、碳中和贡献力量。同时呢，海洋也是潜在的巨大的碳汇，中国也对增强海洋碳汇做了很多的工作。那其中呢，像生态环境部已经基本探明了中国近海的二氧化碳原汇的分布，并且呢，开展了海洋专项的温室气体监测，同时呢，在4个城市展开了盐藻、红树林等等海洋碳汇的监测。目前呢，有关部门也编制了红树林湿地和海水养殖业碳汇的标准。未来呢，通过海洋可再生能源的开发和碳汇的增强，是应对气候变化的重要的举措。海洋是受气候变化影响的脆弱的生态系统，但是也孕育了解决气候变化的可能方案。海洋吸收了大量的二氧化碳，是全球变暖的缓冲器，但代价呢，是海洋生态的稳定性的丧失。那么未来呢，中国将和全球一起积极应对气候变化，促进海洋的可持续发展，为建设海洋命运共同体贡献中国的智慧。谢谢大家。
Thank you so much, Professor Tenfei, for your very insightful presentation. Basically, I agree very much with you. Currently, you are also looking into some adaptation of climate disasters, biodiversity, as well as climate resilience. I think these are key points which will be discussed sometime next week in COP27. So I'm pretty sure, especially you also mentioned renewable energy. I think currently globally are talking about sustainable energy possibility, and in particular you are mentioning windmills, wind energy, and also tidal energy, which are already in such a exploration stage. A number of countries now in the world are developing, putting lots of resources on the direction. I'm pretty sure our audience would have some further question to learn from your presentation. So once again, thank you for such a excellent presentation. So let's move on to the next speakers. Dr. Gianluca Ferraro, who is a Senior Research Fellow, Center for Blue Governance from the University of Portsmouth in the UK. Let me just aid one of his current job. Dr. Ferraro has a work as a policy researcher and policy analyst in academic organization, the institutions of the European Union and public agencies. So Professor Ferraro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Liu, for the presentation. And thank you very much for the organizers for the invitation to this panel. I'm going to share my presentation. Just give me 1 second. Can you all see my?
It's coming up, not yet.
Not yet. Let's try again. Yes, should be now.
No, it's okay. Yes.
Okay,
please
perfect.
Go.
Yeah. So I am. Oh, that's strange. So this afternoon, I'm going to basically speak about climate change and issues of cooperation, but I'm going to do this from a specific angle, in the sense that I'm going to look into also biodiversity loss, matters of implementation, and I'm going to also focus on a specific geographical area, that is Europe, to address the issue of maritime cooperation, regional cooperation. So my starting point is that, of course, climate change is an important issue. It's a threat, it's a challenge globally for the humankind. But there is also a second challenge, a second threat that is extremely worrying, and that's about biodiversity loss. And recently, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, together with the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, they've jointly produced a report that basically stresses the huge interlinkages that exist between climate change and biodiversity loss. The linkages are, of course, negative in the sense that more climate change will basically determine more loss in biodiversity, and that, of course, losing biodiversity will exacerbate even further the climate change. But there are also positive links in the sense that, as we have mentioned before already, healthy ecosystem, healthy oceans, healthy forests could help in the fight against climate change, both on the side of mitigation and on the side of adaptation. Therefore, the need for biodiversity conservation is extremely relevant, not only for the biodiversity itself, but for this relation with climate change and for all the many services that ecosystems have proven to give to humankind. Now, there have been lots of effort done at the international level, and we have mentioned that there are going to be more COPs in the coming months, not only for climate change, but also for biodiversity later on this year. So there are lots of international efforts, but often we don't see the results that we would like to have. For example, if we think about the protection of areas, both on land and in the seas, we see often weak management, weak enforcement, and therefore the final results that we can achieve are in a way disappointing compared to the expectations. What has been stressed is that we need a so-called transformative change, a radical shift that is embracing any aspect of our society, going from technology to economic pattern, but also social habits. And of course, what is more relevant for my discipline and for the panel today, it's governance structure and environmental policies in particular. We also know that there are more vulnerable areas to climate change, the so-called climate change hotspots. And some of these hotspots are actually located in Europe, for example, in Southwest Europe and the Mediterranean Sea. And that offers me the opportunity to shift the geographical focus from Asia to Europe, in the sense that the continent, the region, as we can call it from a geopolitical point of view, is very peculiar from the point of view of cooperation. We know that since the Second World War, Europe has gone through a huge and impressive history of European integration and cooperation that, of course, has been achieved also thanks to funding schemes, to programs that in a way promote cooperation. For example, the Interreg program is one that the European Union is specifically dedicated to cooperation across regions, across member states. But there are, of course, many other schemes, including Horizon Europe, to fund research from a transnational perspective. But there is one element that is very peculiar to Europe, to the European Union. It has that it has developed an entire body of laws and policies and program strategies that are common to 27 so-called member states. And that is quite unique. There is, of course, also for the environment, very well-developed policy framework that I will briefly mention in a couple of minutes. And what is clear is that across the decades, this European environmental policy framework has worked as an important engine for developing also national policies that are more responsible, more sustainable, and that takes into account both climate change and biodiversity loss. Of course, also in Europe, we've got weaker achievements that we wanted to have, that we expected. And this is in a way linked to several aspects. One of these is, of course, a very complex multi-level governance that exists in Europe, if we consider the European Union level, but also the national governments, and then, of course, the subnational jurisdictions that are present in all the European member states. Now, this is to give you a very quick overview on the many international efforts that have been done in terms of biodiversity conservation, climate change. The 92 was a milestone with the adoption of the United Nations Convention, Framework Convention on Climate Change, and with the adoption of the Convention on Biological Diversity. We're going to have probably new developments in the coming months, as I mentioned before. And what is clear is that the European Union, you can see it on the left-hand side, has complied with all these requirements at the international level with its own directives and regulations. So let's say legal instruments, but also with policies, more strategic programs and action plans. And within the environmental area, there are a few directives that are extremely important: the nature directives, the water framework directives, and for the marine environment, of course, the marine strategy framework directive. They, in a way, all come together and are confirmed in the so-called EU biodiversity strategy that is complying with the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have no time to go in the detail of the European environmental policy framework, but what is interesting is that through one of the projects that is funded by the European Union and that the University of Portsmouth, the Center for Blue Governance, is coordinating, the name is Macrobios, we were able basically to map for some of the European member states the legal framework that they put in place. In compliance with the EU requirements, but also in compliance with international obligations for climate change. Particularly, we looked into adaptation and for biodiversity loss. And what we saw is basically that for many of the states, also including Norway, but that is not an EU member state, and the UK that has left the Union, we see that there are very elaborate legal framework that have been put in place, both on climate change, on biodiversity, but also strategies that are national strategies to respond to these major threats. So let's say that the enactment of international obligations for climate change and for biodiversity works in a way pretty well. And if we focus on two specific countries that we study more in detail, that are France and Spain, this is actually confirmed in terms of laws and strategies, but also in terms of the, let's say, governance structures that I mentioned at the very beginning, that we need to reform or to change or to innovate. We saw that the two countries, so France on the left-hand side and Spain on the right-hand side, they both have, of course, national bodies, national agencies, regional jurisdiction with authority in environment and in climate change. They've got science evidence and science advice mechanisms that I've mentioned in a previous presentation as a relevant point, of course, in governance. They've got good channels also for interaction with the society. Thanks to another project, though, we saw that once we move from the national level to the subnational level, that's basically when more problems come up, both in terms of actions against climate change and actions in favor of biodiversity. In the two countries, Spain and France, we've got the so-called outermost regions of Europe. So it means that there are regions of these states, but they're very far away from mainland Europe. For the case of Spain, it's the Canary Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. And for the case of France, we studied in particular the Réunion Island, Réunion, in the Indian Ocean. what we saw here is basically that we face much more challenges when we move from the enactment level of the national level to the regional execution, and of course then enforcement. And we think that it's really these phases of execution and enforcement that are still weak in many situations. I will not go into the detail of the two different countries, but we saw that they put in place measures both for biodiversity protection, biodiversity restoration, in several ways, and of course with the historical development as well in response to the legal requirements. We know that, of course, in Spain, the region has also a lawmaking power, and that is not the case for French regions, for example. So also the Canary Islands are developing their own law for biodiversity and climate change. But we saw basically more or less common challenges in the implementation once we interviewed the public administrations that are involved with environmental issues in these territories. First of all, there is often a non-alignment of the political agendas when we move from the international level to the national and to the subnational ones, meaning that often there are priorities at the regional and local level that have to do with economic development and societal development that are priorities on the political agenda, more than, I would say, environmental issues. Of course, these political agenda have an impact on the money that is allocated, because of course, any resource allocation is a political decision. So of course, also we found that in some situations, money is lacking to enforce actions for biodiversity conservation, for example. In this multi-level governance that I mentioned before, often we have situations of complexity and clashes or ambiguities in the sharing of powers between the different jurisdictions. And of course, we also have got, in a way, conflicts sometimes between the region and the local level, because there is often a sense of appropriation of the territory at the local level. And therefore, it's more difficult to put in place, for example, marine protected areas that imply a huge problem in terms of social acceptance. And we found indeed some conflicts of uses in both regions, more precisely with fisheries and with tourism when it comes to biodiversity conservation. There, of course, a culture of public engagement, so basically involving these interests in the production of strategies, in the adoption of laws would help, but sometimes the public engagement culture is not very strong, neither in one area nor in the other. And of course, again, the scientific advice, there should be sometimes a better link, more for the Canary Islands than for Réunion, but it seems to work pretty well. More connections between the public agencies and the universities as a channel of communication and science advice. And of course, in all these situations, when we interview the public administrators, they raise the issue of transnational cooperation. That is one of the topic of today. That is an important tool according to them in their own work. It's really relevant because it could help in data availability. Often in environmental matters, we do not only miss money, but sometimes often we miss data or complete data. So transnational cooperation would definitely strengthen this, also in terms of how to exchange and how to, in a way, make them more useful for the public administration. There is a need of mutual learning that transnational cooperation would help even further, of course, with the sharing of knowledge and practices and good examples. This would help also in the administrative capacity building. This area, Réunion and Canary Islands, are quite small. So, of course, their capacity in administrative terms is limited. But of course, something that I always like very much is the idea that cooperation can make idea travel. And ideas we know are relevant for any institutional change and also for the transformative change that we need for if we want to address biodiversity and climate change in a better way. What was stressed is that we need transnational cooperation, of course, within Europe, where we have it already, but we need to strengthen it with other, for example, overseas entities or many other countries that have got faraway regions, but also outside the European Union. And when I say outside the European Union, the relevance is basically in the ocean basins where these regions are located. For example, this is the case for Réunion. They've got a very good cooperation within the Indian Ocean, thanks to the Indian Ocean Commission. But we also could put in place stronger connections, even informally, for example, in the Macaronesian region. There is a region that includes the Canary Islands, but also Portuguese Islands and the state of Cape Verde. And basically, this concludes my presentation today. I just want to leave with very few takeaway points. First of all, we need to address climate change, also taking into account the biodiversity loss. We need, of course, a transformative change also in governance if we want to better address this climate biodiversity nexus. And these new governance models need to be multi-level, involve the national but also the subnational jurisdictions, and promote stronger cooperation, not only between states, but also between subnational entities, in this case specifically regions and sub-regional entities. Thank you very much for your attention. I leave you also in the slides the website of the two projects that I mentioned, Macobayos and Move On, and I will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ferraro, for your suggestion and your presentation. Very interesting and updated presentation. I'm pretty sure that it catch up this mainstream of our discussion here today. Later, we will definitely come back to you. So in the meantime, let's put on to the next speakers, inviting Professor Zhou Keyuan, who is a well-known international legal expert, and he has already made tremendous effort during the time of the South China Sea arbitration case. I personally also learned a lot in the last decade also. He has also contributed substantially in international journal with regard to legal aspect of China, maritime area, and also related to the dispute issue. So Professor Zhou Keyuan was teaching in Lancashire, Central Lancashire University. He is pretty busy now. He is also coming back to in the new area, Law School of Dalian Maritime University. And today he is going to speak on climate change and fisheries regulation, which is also a timely issue now. Many countries in the world, especially initiated by the United States, addressing to IUU issue, which is related to management of fishery regulation. So Professor Zhou, please take the floor. Welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fu Guo, for your very kind introduction, and welcome. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to join you in this panel discussing the climate change with the ocean governance. First of all, I would like to send my warmest congratulations on the newly established research center, the Huayang Research Center for Maritime Cooperation and Ocean Governance, which I believe will play a very key and influential role in future studies in this respect at both national and international levels. And when we come to climate change in international law, we usually talk about sea level rise, how and to what extent sea level rise will affect, like such as the baselines and the base points, which subsequently will affect the maritime entitlements of a coastal state. But now, today I talk about something different. It is very closely connected to the previous presentation about the biodiversity laws, and talk about the fisheries management, and with special reference to fisheries agreements. And as we know that human beings, as we are not really fully understand the relationship between climate change and fisheries, and what are the precise and the localized impacts of climate change on fisheries. So the temperature plays an essential role in the biology and ecology of marine organisms, and also the speed at which populations like the speed at which the fish populations must move, adapt, or acclimate to change the sea temperatures. So this is the one aspect of the climate change, the global warming. And the second one is the shifts in stock distribution due to climate change have the potential of creating local extinction of economically important stocks while enhancing fisheries in areas where they were not present before. So we can see that some fishery species, they move from the original localities to other areas. Also, rising water temperatures and ocean acidification damage coral reefs by enhancing reef dissolution and by erosion, affecting coral species distribution and leading to community changes. Loss of coral reef habitats leads to a reduction in reef fisheries production, which negatively impacts communities and countries highly dependent on coral reef ecosystems for their food, income, and livelihoods. What is worse is that ocean acidification can slow the rebuilding of coral reefs and weaken their structure. So the sea level rise will likely damage or destroy many coastal ecosystems, such as mangroves, seagrasses, and coral reefs, as mentioned before. And climate change in particular would affect the fisheries and the fishery industry in East Asia. As we know, 85% of fishers and the fish farmers worldwide live in Asia, with the greatest numbers be in China. So this is the impact of climate change in East Asia. Thus, any adverse impact of climate change on fisheries will inevitably affect the livelihoods of fishers and the fishing communities. So then I would like to move on to some legal aspects, how some principles of international law apply to this respect. As for the governance of climate change and fisheries, there are two different but associated legal frameworks in international law. The first is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and the second is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. So there are two different legal regimes, one for climate change, the other is for the ocean governance. It is acknowledged that although there are no specific reference to climate change in most of the Law of the Sea instruments, there are rules relevant to climate change, both under the UNCLOS and also under custom international law. One example which incorporates climate change is the 2008 Protocol on Integrated Coastal Zone Management in the Mediterranean Sea. It makes express reference to the UNFCCC and to climate change in its preamble, and also in Article 5, which identifies the obligation of state parties to prevent and or reduce the effects, in particular, of climate change as one of the objectives of integrated coastal management. However, there's no such express mention in fisheries agreements, whether global, regional, or bilateral, yet the foreign legal principles should be applicable to both climate change and fishery management. So there are four principles or approaches I identified in this presentation. The first one is the precautionary approach or precautionary principle. this principle requires states to take precautionary measures, even if there's no conclusive scientific proof of potential damage to a particular natural environment, climate, or fishery. The precautionary approach was first incorporated into the international fisheries law as the 1995 Straddling Fish Stocks Agreement, which provides that the states shall apply the precautionary approach widely to conservation, management, and of exploitation of straddling fishery stocks. And also, this principle is applicable to climate change. And according to the UNFCCC, the agreement, the parties should take precautionary measures to anticipate, prevent, or minimize the causes of climate change and mitigate its adverse effects. So this is the common principle, legal principle, which applicable both to climate change and the fisheries management. The second one is the principle of sustainable development, which is also mentioned in the previous presentations. And if we look at the relevant international legal instruments, like the UNFCCC, which obliges states to promote sustainable development or sustainable management, and promote and cooperate in the conservation and enhancement. The UN Convention on Biological Diversity, which also has such relevant provisions. Then the third one is the ecosystem approach. The ecosystem approach contains three basic elements of conservation principles, such as the maximum net recruitment, which requires harvesting and associated activities to prevent a decrease in the size of any harvested population to levels below those which ensure the population's stable recruitment. The second one is maintenance of ecological relationships. The third one requires the parties to maintain the ecological relationships that existed between harvested, dependent, and related populations of the fisheries. So the ecosystem principle or approach is generally incorporated in the international fisheries law, but it is still, there's a room to discuss whether it is applicable to climate change. As one view opines that efforts to develop an ecosystem-based approach without taking into account climate change would lead to unfortunate results. So this is something that we have to consider how it can apply to the climate change legal regime. The fourth one is the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. And this one is definitely very visible in the climate change law, but whether it can be applicable to the fisheries management, and we can further have some discussion, particularly between North and South, between developing and developed countries in fisheries agreements. So some two examples. One is like the fishery agreement between China and Japan, which was concluded in 1997. And as we know that this one was concluded just after the come into effect of the UNCLOS, and a very significant agreement, I should say, and also can normalize the fisheries relations between the two countries. But as we know that it is an agreement without taking into account the impacts of climate change. And the second one is the very recent agreement in the relating to the Arctic Ocean, and considered some kind of potential impacts of climate change, and before the fishing becomes widespread. So this is more advanced fisheries agreements. So it is worth examining some of the latest fishery agreements to see whether climate change factor has been considered. Climate change could be a necessary element in future making of fisheries law at the international, regional, bilateral, or even domestic levels. Towards that direction, future fishery agreements should not only apply the legal principles, but also introduce more specific measures in response to climate change, such as reduction of emissions from fishing vessels, improvement of fuel efficiency, and the reduction of yields and increase of yield by variability. So this is also some regional efforts for climate resilience in fisheries management. So because of the time, I skipped this part. And some related issues, and like the impact of carbon storage on fisheries, how we can regulate, and certain climate mitigation and adaptation measures may have significant impacts on the marine environment and also fisheries. Some conclusion. The International Bar Association in 1914 released a detailed report advocating the concept of climate justice. Climate justice implies the recognition that climate change is a matter of human rights and development, and also that the victims of global warming are not responsible for it. Climate justice also means sharing responsibility. In terms of fishery management and the fishery legal regime, it is time to accommodate climate change considerations into the process of fishery policies and fishery lawmaking, whether international, regional, or domestic. With this in mind, mankind may realize climate justice for present and future generations. Fugu, I just stop here and back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for bringing up update related to climate change and fishery regulation. Of course, this is one of the pressing issues, even without considering climate change issue. Global fishery management, as always, is the problems unsolved. So moving forward with this pressing issue coming up, pushing every one of the players in the world to pay more attention to look into fishery challenge now. I think this is obviously something lying ahead, and also Professor Zhou connect the Arctic situation, which is currently has been put on even more urgent region to be considered. So I thank you for bringing up such a fruitful information, and I think later we definitely would like to learn more from you. Thank you. So the next speaker, Professor Walker Robin. Early on, the staff mentioned to me that there is a technical barrier that we cannot connect with Professor Walker Robin. I don't know if you are already online. Professor Robin, have you been able to successfully connect with us? Okay. If there would be connection problems, perhaps we will leave it for now. If I may, let me now directly move into the commentary stage, inviting two distinguished members to join the discussion here. The first one, Dr. Wu Sichun, of course, the organizer and chairman of the board, China Southeast Asia Research Center on the South China Sea, chairman Huayang Research Center for Maritime Cooperation and Ocean Governance. And of course, founding president, National Institute for South China Sea Studies. So it is once again a great delight to listen to Dr. Wu Sichun's comment on various issues. But of course, I will follow Professor Zhou Keyuan's earlier congratulation note to Dr. Wu Sichun for successfully establishing Huayang Research Center for Maritime Cooperation and Ocean Governance. We of course look forward to much broader area to be developed under your leadership. So Dr. Wu, please take the floor.
谢谢富国。刚才听了几位专家的演讲，这个非常认真，也非常感兴趣的这个听了。我先简单的做一些评论，也可能会有一些问题，我一位一位的来。这个谷川辉太先生，他结合日本的情况，他介绍了这个 BC 的一个生态系统，尤其是生态多样性的、生物多样性的恢复，尤其是给我印象深刻的，日本在这个生物多样性系统的恢复方面，如何调动地方的积极性，让地方行动起来。他举了一个例子，就是海草床的恢复，非常生动的案例。我印象深刻的是几年前我在东京参加学术会议的时候，后来谷川辉太先生带我参观了东京湾。他说东京湾在60年代的时候，伴随着东京工业化、城市化的推进，东京湾的海洋生态破坏非常严重。后来从日本从80年代吧，我印象当中是开始修复东京湾的生态。那么我们坐着船整个环绕了东京湾看，从海水的质量，这个海草的恢复，以及东京湾沿岸的这些居民生活以及其他一些设施来看，那么日本政府在这个领域下的功夫是非常之大。后来我把谷川辉太先生请到海口来，在我的南海研究院做了几场演讲。因为我觉得东京湾这样一个生态恢复的成功案例，对中国、对海南，我说我们海口湾生态破坏也非常严重。当然它的污染程度和它的规模不能和东京湾相提并论，但是东京湾恢复生态系统的做法值得我们学习和借鉴。所以后来我请他专门在南海研究院搞了一场讲座，就是以东京湾生态恢复为案例。所以今天他介绍的生物多样性系统的恢复，又使我想到了一个问题，就是怎么样，因为光是靠政府来推进生态系统、生物多样性，那么可能无济于事。那么怎么样像日本这样从基层开始，从渔民渔业协会开始一点一点的做，那么引入各方面的非政府组织、政府几方面的力量介入，甚至还有国际环保组织的介入，来恢复生态多样性系统。所以我在想，我可能下一次要请谷川辉太先生访问的地方是我的家乡，江苏的北部盐城。那黄海之滨是我长大的地方，那个地方每年有3万亩的土地形成滩涂，但是滩涂的生态系统的恢复是一个大问题。它现在仅仅是长了一种叫大米草来改善海岸带的生态多样性。 那么像他刚才介绍的这种日本的海草能不能引入到江苏这个黄海海岸带？所以我想这是给我的一种启示了。我想我先做这么一个点评，我给古川先生的一个问题就是在这个领域生物多样性恢复方面中日两国能不能合作，如何合作？再一个，在日本生物多样性系统这个恢复方面，日本它的政府投入，中央政府投入，地方政府投入，社会之间的投入是怎么分配的？所以这是我感兴趣的两个问题。滕慧教授他介绍了中国的一些做法。现在我们面临的一些挑战是海平面的上升，那么还有海洋海水的酸化，海岸带生态系统的破坏，尤其是红树林和珊瑚礁的退化。我这个在海南工作生活了30多年，那是亲身体会到，或者说眼睁睁的看到了我们的海岸带受侵蚀。就海口90年代初我们到海口来的时候游泳，在一个叫白沙门的地方还有桂林洋的地方，现在这2个地方已经不能去游泳了。当年的海岸带那也就仅仅30年的时间，当年的海滩已经消失了。那就是伴随着海平面的上升，那么海岸带生态系统的破坏，尤其是近岸珊瑚礁。那在90年代当地的农民是把珊瑚礁炸回了以后来烧石灰用的，后来地方政府采取立法的措施禁止了这种状况。但是在90年代甚至90年代之前，这还是一种比较普遍的现象，红树林的退化更明显了。所以我觉得海岸生态系统的退化确实对我们来说，可能我们在立法，我们在治理层面还是起步晚了一点。他也报了几个数据，珊瑚礁的退化从60%，有些地方已经下降到20%啊。当然中国政府也采取了一些应对措施啊，中国应对疾病的2035。那么我是想问滕飞教授，我们现在已经制定了行动的规划，那么措施也出台，对应对上述我们讲的，你刚才讲的海平面上升、海洋海水酸化，还有海岸带生态系统的破坏，到底作用有多大？另外，海洋碳汇对我们的双碳啊，2030年碳达峰，2060年那么碳中和，那么到底有多大的作用啊？那么这个作用海洋碳化作用能不能量化啊？英国的普利茅斯这个费拉罗先生，他举了很好的例子啊，那么也提供了这个英国在应对或者欧盟应对气候变化方面的一些有效的做法。他尤其是介绍了这个联合国气候大会，那么制定的一些公约，提出了一些倡议和行动纲领。那么现在面临一些挑战是落实不够，没有达到预期的目标。那么有一些国家不作为，有一些国家作为不到位。他举了一些例子，有的是资金缺失，有的资金不落实，影响应对措施的落实。另外他提出来这个有一些次区域的组织或者国家在治理层面还是面临技术和资金的短缺的问题。所以他提出来要从国家层面再到次区域的国家层面再到国际层面进行合作。所以 我在想问这个费拉罗先生的一个问题，就是目前从欧洲国家应对气候变化的一些做法，哪些领域、哪些措施可以为中国或者其他发展中国家所借鉴？在一个气候变化哥本哈根这个协定提出来，发达国家要向发展中国家在应对气候变化方面提供资金支持和转移技术。那么从目前情况来看，我认为这一点是做得不到位的。特朗普在特朗普担任美国总统期间又推出了这个巴黎协定，当然这个拜登又恢复了，但是现在我不知道未来到底情况怎么样。这一次埃及的气候变化大会，你预期能产生什么成果？对我们共同应对气候变化能够产生什么积极的影响？科院讲了气候变化和渔业的问题，气候变化对渔业的负面影响，珊瑚礁的退化、消失，导致渔业种群的迁移，一些鱼类这个数量的减少，甚至有一些，就我所了解，在南海有一些珍稀种群已经濒临灭绝的危险。那么他也提出了类似的警告。另外，在应对气候变化、应对渔业这个资源的衰退等等，这个国际合作、国际这个法律框架的有关的一些具体的做法，所以我想问科院，这个你认为在渔业领域，国际社会在从法律制度建设和国际合作方面，我们还有哪些需要做的？中国和其他国家和一些尤其是一些欧美的发达国家相比，我们的差距在哪里？然后我们如何促进这两者之间的差距？我就做这么一些评论，富国。
Yeah, thank you so much. You have already actually comments on every presenters as well as raise a number of questions. Quite enough for them to consume later on in the Q&A time. So before we open up the floor, let's invite Professor Chang Xiuzhe, who is professor at the Chinese Academy of Macroeconomic Research. He is a distinguished economist, co-chair and doctoral supervisor of the academic committee of Morgansan Institute. So this is also one of the occasions that we can listen to Professor Chang sharing his view on this particular issue, climate change and ocean governance. Professor Chang, please take the floor.
首先感谢我们吴世存院长安排我这个时段和大家一起讨论研究问题，特别是很开心遇到刘富国先生，因为我在过去这些年11次到台湾，其中有好几次住在木栅的正大国关，这个住小楼里头，这个见到富国也是很开心。刚才对于以上4位中外嘉宾的发言，世存先生做了很好的梳理和这个挖掘要把这个问题引向深入，这个我就不重复了。这里边涉及到技术项目这个以及法律多样性等等吧。这个刚才一会儿我们还可以继续讨论。我想借此机会呢，就我个人研究这个问题，我不是这方面专家，我是搞经济学的，我想从我的角度呢，我谈个人的4点看法，可能 不一定很切合题，但是我提供另一种思考。第一个问题呢，就是面对着这个气变和这个海洋问题，我们人类应该树立一种什么样的更高层次的这个价值理念，而且是基本的价值理念。我觉得这个问题是第一位的问题，这个我在1987年曾提出中国要搞这个产权市场，后来当时我是一个狭义的产权，就是物权，这个包括企业产权啊，这个等等嘛。那么从本世纪以来，我开始由狭义到广义产权。广义产权呢，我出了一部书，2009年出了这部《广义产权论》。广到哪里呢？第一，广到天、气候和环境；第二呢，广到地，包括土地，因为经济学的地呢，包括地面、地下以及地上的这个水流、海洋，海洋也在地里头。第三呢，是广到天和地之间的人，就是天地人产权论，非常有幸。2009年出版以后呢，台北的中华经研究院约我去讲了这个广义产权论，因为是中国人的智慧，就是天地人。那么今天不讲这个问题，由这天地人产权论，我在2011年把这本书浓缩成一篇论文，在上海大学学报发表。那么进而我提出了一个哲理性的命题，而不是经济学的，就人类应该构建一个天地人生命共同体，天地人生命共同体这么个理念。那么这样理念呢，在这个上海大学，也是在上海大学学报公开发表，这个网上都有天地人生命共同体的探索。好了，我非常高兴的看到2021年4月22号，中国的领导人在世界气候大会上首次提出了人与自然生命共同体这么个理念。这个人与自然生命共同体，而且这次呢，中共20大他有一句非常重要的话，就是这个要站在人与自然和谐共处的这么一个战略高度来研究这个环境和这个绿色发展问题。这个问题，虽然是中国人提出的，而且是按照中国人的这个哲学提出，这个我的主张是天地人生命共同体。那么现在呢，是国家有这个决策，现在就是怎么样把这个哲理性的理念变成一个社会性的行动，而且呢，用这样一个理念呢，跟世界各个国家去打交道。因为这里边我觉得既有中国自己的文化的内涵，也有人类共同的价值取向。就上午我说的，这是一个特共一体的理念。这是我提的第一个问题，就是这个基本的战略价值或叫战略理念怎么做。第二个就是我要分成这个天上有没有产权。我刚写这部出版这本书的时候，好几个同志就有朋友甚至领导就说，你有点异想天开，天上哪里有产权的？但是我告诉大家，看这个东西原来不是商品，原来不是资产，原来也没有产权，但是京东议定书出来以后，因为它有了指标就有利益，有了利益以后就有产权，由非商品到商品，由非资产到资产，由非产权到产权，有个转变。因此我们要研究这个碳。今天非常高兴的听到古川先生，就是刚才您说东京的古川先生，他讲了蓝碳的问题，很好，蓝碳的问题。那么中国政府现在也研究怎么碳中和， 碳交易，是吧？那么人类现在为了减碳，为了这个有几条路线，我告诉诸位，根据我的研究和梳理，无非是4线推进，人类是4条线。第一，技术路线，古川先生讲的那些海草等等等等，那里边大量的是技术问题，是技术，包括地方政府，是吧？在技术创新上做文章，技术线这是一。第二，结构线，通过调整和改革产业结构、地区结构与其他的城乡结构等等，通过结构的调整来减碳，这是结构线。第3条路线呢，就是规制线。我这里讲的规主要是政府的规制，通过比方说环境税，是吧？通过强制性的拉闸限电，去年不是夏天我在东北住了2月，有些地方就是拉闸限电，这都是强制性的手段来减碳。好，这以上这3条线呢，人们比较熟悉，也比较用的得心应手。技术线、结构线、政府规制线。我这里给诸位提供的是第4条路线，新的一条路线就是产权线，用环境产权、用碳产权来激励人们、激励政府、激励产业、激励企业、激励公民，自觉的、自愿的来减碳。就是说，我是试图给每个中国人，给每一个世界的全球人，每个人身上都安上一个自动减碳的马达，这就是碳产权理论、环境产权理论、天上的产权理论。这里边就是一个利益的一种长机制，或者要是损害者的话，损害了我的环境，导致这些问题，要有一种赔偿机制。如果你做了贡献，要有一种补偿机制，一种激励机制。这是一条市场经济的路线。可惜我们现阶段对于用市场机制的办法，用市场的办法来改革、来发展，比较陌生，比较薄弱。所以这里边有些发达国家这方面还是有一些经验的，是我倒看了一些国外的资料，包括这个澳大利亚的一些资料也有这个方面，所以我提醒呢，这个关注这个天上这条这个产权，就是环境产权。第二个地上的产就是海洋，这个涉及的主要是海洋资源，我把它概括成叫资源产权啊。土地是一种重要资源，矿产也是资源，海洋是今天上午一开始，世存先生就讲了，海洋是人类的宝贵的资源。那么海洋这里边呢，要搞活，要发展。我这里边根据我的广义产权理论呢，广在哪里呢？除了天地人以外，就是不仅仅是原始的所有权，不止初始的所有权是一种产权。原始的所有权派生出来的占有权、支配权、使用权、处置权等等，也是产权的相关的部分。具体到海洋来说，我很关注这个海洋的用益物权。用益物权就是主权或者是原始的产权，可以把它固定下来，把它这个界定下来啊，这最终的所有权谁的？但是在最终的所有权底下，是可以用海洋用益物权来搞活的。内地好多省没有这个海面，那好，我们沿海地区这些个海面可以把用益物权租给内地的这些相关的这个地方或者企业，用活用益物权。为这个用益物权的事情，这个台北的中华经济研究院请我去讲，就两岸之间怎么 怎么样这个加强这个用益物权的合作。我觉得这里边还有大有文章。这是第二，最后一个就是人，天地之间人的产权，这个我更关注，因为在我看来，一绿水青山是金山银山，这是从物的角度来研究，是吧？绿水青山，金银还是一个物。那么从人的角度来研究，我说绿水青山是环境人权，它一方面是物的金山银山，另一方面又是人的环境人权。而一谈到人的这种产权，我说有至少在这个海洋这个问题上有4个方面。第一个知识产权，人的知识；第二个人的技术产权；第三个还有管理产权。我们那么多企业，渔业企业，刚才讲的海上这个以及海上的那些海工设备等等吧，涉海洋的企业多得很。那些企业家的产权在哪里？那么当然还有一些劳工，包括我们的一些大国工匠，涉海洋的，至少是知识、技术、管理、劳动力。现在就说，为了推动我们人类的海洋事业的发展，如何落实人本要素的产权？我觉得这个问题，我们各国的学术界朋友们，我们要讨论，是不是？怎么样进行这个技术创新者的产权界定？特别是在中国这样的有公有制的国家里边，那个公有制单位里边的科技人员的职务发明，怎么样给他一分为一部分归公家所有，一部分归创新者个人。这个问题是有教训的。我们浙江的一些浙大的副校长，我们清华的副校长，因为职务发明问题，这个给了团队的朋友发了一些，结果出了大的问题。这个职务发明，这个产权，我们人的产权怎么办？特别是海洋大省、海洋大国。第二个就是这个知识产权的证券化怎么能够推进？我们现在国内这方面办的不好，但是新加坡的知识产权证券化搞得如火如荼。还有我们这个各个方面的人士，他的身价怎么把它变成资本？身价就像球星和这个电影明星一样，有身价系统。这些问题，总之天地人这3大方面，这3个层次都有很多没有开拓的领域，有很大的探索空间。所以我这里从一个经济学角度向吴世存院长和以及在座的各位朋友谈一点看法进行交流。不一定对，我说的都是外行的话。谢谢。
Thank you, Professor Chang. I'm so glad that you mentioned a good memory when you visited 政治大学 many times, and I was surprised. I can't remember how many times you traveled to our campus. I'm hoping when the pandemic situation easing down further, there will be another time welcoming you back to the campus again. On the talk, actually, we are so glad that Professor Ruben has managed the technical challenge, and now Professor Ruben is connecting with us. So I will leave this to Professor Ruben. Currently is a dean of the law school, Durham University in the UK. So we are so delighted that you can catch up in this the last moment. So please go ahead and then take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the review. I'm very sorry I had some problems earlier to log in on my side entirely. I'll be very, I know it's late in the day, I'll be very brief, but my talk is actually, or my intervention is very much, I think, related to the previous intervention, because this is also about, in a way, about property rights and the support for offshore cooperation. What I want to say briefly is that the key potential for maritime cooperation in the future is to expand the offshore energy and the use of the vast resources of the oceans, particularly wind. Wind energy is now a matter of technology. The technology is available increasingly to harvest offshore wind energy. That's climate friendly, carbon neutral energy, particularly through floating platforms that can be far more off to sea, and therefore harvest the high winds that are actually blowing offshore, rather than as in the past only onshore. So there is huge potential, but at the time being, that the exploitation of that potential requires state support in all systems, both here in the UK, in the United States, and obviously also in China. This is not a matter of whether this is a market economy or not a market economy. It is just necessary that the state supports the development of that energy until it is fully economically viable. Now, the question then is, what is the framework of international law for such support from the state in the shape of subsidies or feed-in tariffs and other things? And interestingly enough, the key development, in particular in the United States, but also elsewhere, is that the state support, so the state making effectively financial support available, is that the developers of offshore energy use a large amount of so-called local content. So that material and technologies produced in the country where the subsidy is paid. So in the state that wants to develop its offshore energy. Now, in principle, and that's a major issue for all countries that want to explore their and develop their offshore energy offshore. Now, in principle, the governing law is that of the WTO, and obviously China is an important member state of the WTO, and the law of the WTO is reluctant to allow states to favor their own economies. It is in principle opposed to this type of rules that would require any economic operator to use the locally available materials or labor. However, and that's really the research we're doing at the university right now, it is not that clear that what the rules are on local content, what we call local content for energy exploitation. And that's a very important point. It may well be that the law is more permissive than we thought. In fact, the only real analysis of this has been undertaken for oil and gas exploration in the countries that have those resources. Most of these countries have local content rules. So when you go and explore and exploit the oil and gas resources, for instance, in Nigeria, you need to have a certain amount of locally sourced materials and locally employed be allowed to do so. However, this has never been fully challenged under WTO. And now the question really is, what would be the rules if you want to develop your offshore renewable industry and at the same time require local content? As I said, the new rules, the new legislation in the United States of America requires just that. You need, in order to be able to get a license to exploit the offshore wind energy in the United States or off the United States coast, you need to have a source, a large amount of the technology and the labor from the United States. You cannot bring it in from your home country if you are an external, if you're an investor. So that is really the open question that needs to be addressed, and the WTO law in this respect is not clear. There's only one case where this has been tried and examined, and that is a dispute between the European Union and Britain, the United Kingdom, which is, as you know, no longer a member state of the European Union. And in that case, the European Union challenged the British rule of local content. So, as you know, around Britain, there are there's a lot of water, the ocean, and a lot of wind energy. And Britain is keen to develop that wind energy, and it currently requires any developer, whether it's British or non-British, to source the material in Britain or a part of it. And that was challenged by the European Union, but the case did never proceed to dispute settlement, to arbitration under the or the dispute settlement body under the WTO. In fact, it was settled by the European Union and the United Kingdom before it reached that stage. So we still don't know really what the rules are, but it is therefore critically important that we do further research on this. I think where this will eventually lead us to look at some cases where the WTO dispute settlement body has considered state subsidies for renewables. There are a few cases, but not too many. And eventually, I think it will require a critique of a purely efficiency-oriented approach to this, and consider that states that develop their offshore marine energy, and particularly their deep water wind energy, are in compliance with their obligations under the Paris Agreement. So they actually are doing something that is required of them by international law. And of course, China is a leader in developing the international climate law, and would also want to be in compliance with the Paris Agreement just as much as the United Kingdom or the United States, for that matter. So I think in the end, our research will be pointing towards a reintegration of climate objectives into the law of the WTO, and it is our hypothesis that therefore WTO law should allow local content rules that actually make it more likely that states invest in offshore renewables than it would otherwise be. So at this point, it's still an open question, but I think I'm confident that our research will make a contribution to assisting states in thinking through the legality of such subsidy regimes, in particular for content. And I think with these remarks, I will conclude my intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ruben. I think perhaps the sound signal may not as strong as we expected. Hopefully, the presentation can be fully covered by most of us. at least from another far end terminal. Probably there is some technical challenge for us. But I hope, because we just run through the commentary before you came in, let me ask if Professor Wu Sichun or Professor Chang would have any further comments or any elaboration from Professor Rubin's presentation. If you would have any further suggestion or comment points, then I would request Dr. Wu to come up. Otherwise, I would now, since we only have another 15 minutes to go, early on, so many questions already being touched upon. So, Dr. Wu, do you have any further comments on Professor Rubin's presentation?
No, I don't have a further comment on Professor Rubin's remarks. I guess it's time for response to the questions both Professor Chang and I raised for those previous speakers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Already quite enough question to be entertained. So let me go first, perhaps for now, ask Dr. Keita Furukawa to respond. I think Dr. Wu already addressed to you quite a number of questions already. Dr. Furukawa.
Thank you, Professor Liu, for having me to speak up at this panel again. And thank you, President Wu, for very good comment and the question and the invitation for your organization. It is really my privilege for attending your new movement. And just quick response for your question and comment. For the Tokyo Bay restoration, as you see, that in the 1970s, we had a very, very severe situation in Tokyo Bay. And since 1980s, some strong regulatory measures for regulating the effluent from the industry, effluent from the household water discharge is very, very strictly controlled, and the water quality is becoming better and better. But we found that the water quality is recovering, but the biodiversity or bioproductivity in the bay is not coming back yet. So since 2003, the governmental body is get together to facilitating the action plan for restoration of the Tokyo Bay. And 10 years later, the second phase of the Tokyo Bay action plan was updated to include not only from the governmental body, but also the non-governmental body can be joined to the such a kind of restoration work. We call it the Tokyo Bay Public-Private Partnership Forum for Restoration of Tokyo Bay. So I hope this kind of the top-down approach and bottom-up approach can be synthesized for making the more stronger multi-level governance construction, even in the size of the Tokyo Bay, but the concept itself can be expanded to the national or regional measures, I think. And quick answer for your question that the seagrass restoration in your hometown seawater. And I'm very optimistic. I can say, yes, we can do that because of the some technical problem or technical matter we have to be overcome is already we have a lot of experience. So it is easy if we put a lot of money or a lot of resources to do the restoration of the seagrass. But in the society point of view, that is very difficult because of we have to incubate the ownership of the local people to join the activity and emphasize the sustainability of the activity is very, very important. And in Japan, we started the restoration work of the seagrass bed starting from the Yokohama in Tokyo Bay. And after that, we organizing the national symposium for the seagrass restoration throughout the each place of Japan and circulate the information and try to gather the people's attention. And it is importantly the incubating, I repeated that incubating the ownership of the people. So if we have a chance to visit your place, maybe we will start from the construction of the good relationship with the stakeholders in the community level. And fisheries or folks is very, very important stakeholders, and the local government is also. And as pointed out Professor Tan, that if we thinking about the trade side or economic side, the inclusion of the industries or private company is really, really key to promote the actual movement in the field. So thank you for your questioning, and I hope this can have some kind of clue for the answer. Back to you. Thank you, Professor Low.
Yes, thank you so much. If I don't think we may not have enough time to go over, but please, Dr. Furukawa, take the earlier question I put on you related to your government contribution to UNDP in the Caribbean region, clean up sargassum. So that is one way to help eliminate those damage as a result of climate change here. So you don't have to respond now, but we look forward to another opportunity to catch up with this through Dr. Wu. Thank you. So next, Professor Chen Fei, do you have any response as Dr. Wu already addressed a few questions to you?
谢谢吴院长和常老师的点评和问题。那么吴院长提到，中国实现碳中和是否可以减少对海洋的影响？那么首先呢，我想说的是，是可以的。全球通过实现碳中和和巴黎协定的目标，可以大幅降低人类系统对海洋的影响，以及由于海平面上升造成的经济损失。那么在去年底的时候，清华大学和英国的 Chatham House 以及牛津大学共同发布了一份报告，我们对碳中和目标可以避免的气候风险进行了测算，其中呢特别包括了由于避免海平面上升所能减少的中国的气候损失。那我们发现呢，在高排放的情景下，中国本世纪末由于海平面上升淹没导致的资产损失可能会超过6万亿美元。而如果能够实现这个碳中和情景当然除了中国之外，全球都要实现。那么在 1.5 度的目标下，这样的一个资产损失呢，可以减少 50%。同时呢，由于沿海的土地淹没的损失，也可以大幅降低，减少 50%。那么和其他的损失一起，可以呢将中国的总的经济损失减少 80%到90%。但是我们也发现呢，因为海洋是一个具有巨大惯性的系统，特别是我们刚才提到，海洋是全球最大的碳汇，也是最大的热汇。那么因为它是有巨大的惯性，因此海洋是调整起来是非常慢的。所以呢，即便我们采取了这个非常具有雄心的减排目标，但是在短期内，甚至相当长的一段时间内，海平面上升的速度和海水酸化的这样的一个情况不能被完全扭转，我们只能减缓它的这个上升和海洋的酸化，但是并不能完全扭转，这是由海洋系统本身的巨大的惯性所决定的。特别是另外就是常老师也提到了市场的问题，我非常赞同。那么虽然中国目前的碳市场并没有包含碳汇的交易，特别是海洋和蓝碳的碳汇的交易，但是我刚才提到，那么最近呢，我们已经陆续发布了一些有关 海洋生态系统红树林碳汇和海水养殖的碳汇的测算。那么有了这些方法学，相信呢，未来可以为在碳交易市场中纳入海洋碳汇创造一定的基础和条件。谢谢。
Thank you, Professor Chen Fei, for this very concise response to Dr. Wu's question. So let's now move on to Professor Ferraro. Dr. Wu also addressed a couple of questions to you. So do you have any quick response, please?
Yes, I'll try to be quick. There was an issue of effectiveness and resources. Now, and they're also very much intertwined. I start with the resources first. Moving from the hypothetics basically to our experience, what we saw in the field, it is true that some of the territories that we analyzed, and we can generalize this to other countries, there is objectively scarce resources. For example, in the case of these small outermost regions of Europe, you've got usually small economies. This is true, but there's also another truth, and is that there is an issue of priorities on the political agendas. So basically, it's that often the money is diverted to priorities that are more in line with the, let's say, with the priorities of the politicians. So for example, if there is unemployment in one specific territory, if you have to decide between investing in unemployment or fighting unemployment and investing in environmental issues, then the choice is much more short-term from the point of view of a politician. About resources, again, what we saw is that actually many of the small interventions, small projects that happen in those territories, and I'm speaking again about Europe, they also happen with the support of the European Union. So again, the cooperation helps a lot with the specific initiatives, because it's not often and only an issue of financial support. Some areas where there is financial support, they often lack resourcing in terms of skills, in terms of human resources present on those islands. And so in this sense, I think that the issue of cooperation is key, because it really can help to build up their expertise or exchange ideas. And I give you one concrete example, and then I stop. Often we speak about ecosystem services for biodiversity, of nature-based solutions even more recently. What we saw is that when we approach the public administrations, those new concepts are often not known or not used, and that would help a lot in the fight against biodiversity loss. So again, it's an issue of resources, yes, but there is also political decision behind that will divert the resources to specific areas.
Thank you very much for such a concise response. This is a really good time management. Thank you so much. Then Professor Zhou Keyuan.
Thank you for Dr. Wu's question. Actually, it's a very simple question, and it's also, but it needs much time to explain because it is the overall legal regime at the international level. But actually, I think now, and in terms of fisheries management, and there's an advocacy that the fisheries management should be built up as adaptation to the climate change. That is adaptive, climate change adaptive fisheries, rather than just for the purpose of exploitation and exploitation for economic benefits. And one suggestion currently in my mind is about, because the fisheries agreements between China and Vietnam in the Gulf of Tonkin and the Beibu Gulf has expired, and the two sides express their very clear intention to renew it. So I would suggest that when the two sides negotiate a new fisheries agreement, please consider climate change as a kind of factor in the fishery management in the Beibu Gulf. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we wrap up this session, since Professor Rubin came in late and probably missed the time to share the view and also to be commented by others. And I think after a round of response from all presenters, as Professor Rubin, you can tell our Japanese colleague Furukawa mentioned this maritime environment protection efforts covering a number of areas, and almost every presenter is here looking into something slightly different dimension. But I want to leave a couple of minutes to you, whether after listening to a round of a discussion, even if unfortunately we cannot have direct comments on your presentation, whether you may have anything to add or anything to be shared at this point. Please, Professor Rubin.
Yeah, thank you. That's very kind of you. I can be very brief. These are excellent comments. I think what the gist of my contribution is the development or the use of offshore energy resources, in particular wind, is the future of all states that have a large coastline. And the technology, that is my key, the technological innovation in this field is very rapid, and it will allow us to harvest those vast resources much further off to sea than ever before. And states, therefore, all across the world should get ready for this, and that is actually a way of complying with the Paris Agreement that China and the other countries have ratified. So I think we should then turn our attention to what extent states want to invest in this and how they design their subsidy regimes. And I think that is the frontier issue now. And in countries such as the United States, you see that there is a lot of thinking about the so-called local content, which is the technology and labor sourced from the country that has that coastline. And even for foreign investors requires local content use. And so the question is really, is that economically efficient? But also, if we want to have it, what are the WTO rules on this? And that requires much further research. But I would say that my main idea would be my main suggestion is that is the future of maritime cooperation and maritime law and policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rubin. I can tell your second intervention, the sound is much better. Every one of us can really comprehend whatever you suggested. And I think, as you mentioned, especially you cover mostly wind energy. And early on, one of the panelists, Professor Teng Fei from Tsinghua University in Beijing, also covered in his presentation. So as you already suggested quite rightly, now moving beyond, academic community would have to work with industry and perhaps across national borders to work with others team. Perhaps this is one of the area at least from my understanding, Professor Teng Fei is leading this direction. So hopefully this short encounters among all of us probably can explore into some potential collaboration among us. And I think I would take one specific point from Dr. Wu Sichun's comment earlier. He addressed and also put a serious question mark. In about a week, COP27 will start the discussing and perhaps debating on which way to go further from here. And almost every question we discuss in this panel may be able to refer to what happened next week in COP27. Hopefully, as a result of this discussion, all of us we learn something and as a progress. But in order to get to this sustainable energy, I think from our level, at least academic policy research, we might be able to find potential area to work together to push such an initiative possible. So once again, I'd like to thank especially Professor Wu Sichun for leading such a opportunity and also open up potential ground for all of us. So Professor Ruben, perhaps after our session, if anything leading to an initiative or proposal, please contact Dr. Wu Sichun. I really look forward to seeing such a potential and possibility. So without further ado, let me announce we should adjourn from now. Once again, thank you for all your contribution and really making this session really worthwhile and valuable to learn from each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, Fuguo, Yuan.
Thank you.
Hey to professors. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
好，谢谢各位主持人，谢谢主持人和各位发言嘉宾和评论嘉宾。议题3到此结束，感谢大家的参与。
好，谢谢。
今天晚上的欢迎晚宴将于6点半正式开始，请